Well, for March, we're going to do mostly an indoor Mosey. Show you some things that, in this case, have been here quite a long time, but many people may not know anything about or much about. This wonderful relief carving was done in 2007 by Roger Benedict. I had gone to his house, he lives near Sister Bay, to look at some trees for him, and he invited me in for coffee, and I noticed some nice carvings around the house, and I asked him who did them. He said, well, I did. And I started thinking about this right away. Remember, I had Eric go over with me a couple days later, and we commissioned him on the spot then to do this for us. We didn't know what it was going to be, but he ended up doing this kind of panoramic view of different clearing buildings and three pines, all one piece of basswood that he got from someplace up north. So we've had it here going on 20 years now, but it's one of the nicest pieces of art we have at the clearing. And I'm sure glad that Roger had me go look at his trees. This wonderful lamp, floor lamp, has been around as long as any of us have. It was Jensen's. It's probably one of a kind, probably made in Chicago. We don't know for sure. Some people suggested over the years that maybe the blacksmith in Ellison Bay, there used to be a forge in Ellison Bay. Every little village and burg had a blacksmith back in the old days. And maybe that person made it, but I don't think so. We think it was probably made in Chicago. This wonderful dragon motif. It weighs about, I don't know, maybe 60, 70 pounds. It's really heavy. Dragons down here too. It's not the original shade. That was long gone by the time Eric and I showed up. So it had no shade at all it was like that when we first came here. And we always wanted a shade. We didn't know what kind it had. There was no picture of the original lamp with the original shade. So we ended up commissioning Gary Shadwar, who's Mr. Glass in Door County and now the Clearing Board president. The three of us put our heads together and came up with this nice glass shade. I know that before I came in '99, there had been a one-day Saturday seminar on people could bring in their antiques to have them appraised, and I think the two women that appraised that day, they looked at this, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, I think they said it was worth, this is back 25 years ago or more, maybe 30, like $1,000. They thought, it's one of a kind, so how do you know for sure? But it really is quite a piece. It lived in Professor's Quarters living room for years. We brought it into the lodge maybe 10 years ago when we had the shade made. Anyway, we love this lamp. It's my favorite lamp in the world. I call it the dragon lamp. Now we're in the schoolhouse, and back in 2010, we commissioned Ram Rojas, a local artist and muralist, to do this mural for us. It was our first pass ahead for the clearing project, facility fundraiser project, back in 2010. And Ram worked on this over the course of several months during the season while classes were going on, and it was a great project. It's a recreation of an original mural that was painted in the late 1930s that Jensen commissioned artist Vladimir Rusev, who was one of Franklin Roosevelt's Works Project Administration muralists, that they did works in public buildings, federal buildings, post offices, and such. And Rusev had done a couple of, I think he did the post office in Turkana, Wisconsin, and the one in Ironwood, Michigan, maybe others. Anyway, Jensen somehow got to know Rusev. He was teaching art down in Fish Creek, as I remember it, and Jensen got to know him and ended up commissioning him to do this work. The mural was painted over after Jensen died, the original one, painted over. We don't know why. I've always wondered if there was maybe some water damage on it. And the clearing was so poor at that time that they couldn't afford to repair it, so they just painted it over, maybe with the hopes that they would someday recreate it. And that just kind of got forgotten. I had found, there's an old a black and white picture of this in a book about Jens Jensen that that's when I first learned about it when I came here. And then I found out a few years later that there was a color slide of the original mural at the Milwaukee County Historical Society. And I wrote them and found out that, yeah, there was a slide. We got a copy of it, blew it up, and that's what Rom worked off of to recreate that original mural. So I don't think it's an exact recreation, but it's pretty close. You know, it was a fun project, and nice to have it back. The two main things happening outside at the clearing right now are not fun. One of them is at the Jensen Center where they're working on that new septic system and making a huge mess and a lot of noise. The other one that's been happening here is cutting down some dead and dying white ash trees from emerald ash borer. There are a couple were close enough to the buildings. A couple here, one over here by the west storm that we thought, and we just better have a tree service come in and take care of them. They're just too big and too tricky for Brian and our volunteers to do. So we just had them drop the trees and cut them into sections, and now the volunteer crew, with Brian's help of course, are making firewood. So we'll have ash firewood for years to come, and more trees of course will come down over time because all the larger, the borer doesn't attack young trees. You have to get to a certain size before there's enough food in there for them to eat. But these were all dead or close to it. So they have to come down, unfortunately. That's just how it goes sometimes. Brian Bucos, our maintenance person, taps some of the sugar maples at the clearing every year, and he kind of moves his yard around, but this year it's back on campus, and he must have about, I don't know, 20, 30 buckets out in different places. I think it's done running already. It was dripping fast last week, but he makes maple syrup, and everybody in the office is the beneficiary of 1 quart of his wonderful maple syrup. Anyway, but I think it's done for the season. In 2019, we hired Ron Rojas again to do these murals. We had thought about it for quite a few years and finally decided to do it in 2019 with the 3 pines on the tall back wall, forested scene on the side walls, and then Bertha Fulkerson at her loom on one side and Jens Jensen at the Cliff House on the other side. So he did this in late summer and fall of 2019. I think we had a big celebration in here in early December of that year to kind of unveil the murals. It was very well attended and it was a lot of fun. But been a nice addition to this big classroom we call it, or the great room at the Jensen Center, is a multi-purpose room. It's a classroom, it's a meeting room, it's also our interpretive center, and this was a nice addition to our interpretation of the clearing here in the Jensen Center. And finally, this painting came to the clearing, I think my first year here in 2000. It's a painting of the Jensen Farm back in Dibble, Denmark, where he grew up. The original farm burned down, or I'm not sure if it burned down entirely or it was just badly damaged during the Great Battle of Dibble in 1864 during that Second War of Schleswig. So my guess is that this is the next house that replaced that original one. I don't know that for sure. Anyway, it was in the Jensen family in Denmark for years, and then it came to us about 24 years ago as a gift to the clearing from the Jensen family, and it's hung here in the Jensen Center since then.